Known as the Gun Alley murder, dating back almost a century to 1921, 29-year-old wine bar owner Colin Ross was convicted of rape and murder of a 12-year-old Alma Tursk and ordered to execution when in fact he was an innocent man. The crime had become known and talked about by everyone, that people gathered to the alley off Little Collins Street to either pay their respects or to play detective and attempt to solve such a case. Because of the publicity surrounding the case, the police felt the pressure to ensure the public that the area was safe and that they had caught the criminal. They then made the mistake of turning on a man who was cooperating with them and decided that he was their killer and arrested him despite several witnesses placing him within his bar that entire afternoon and further evidence clearing him. The crime drew major attention from newspapers around Australia and was regularly updated, especially in New South Wales, Victoria and Tasmania. Since the crime was committed in the inner CBD, an alley off Little Collins Street, I've decided to base this discussion on how the crime was told in Melbourne through the Age. When reading the headlines of 1922 after Ross had been arrested, they were very one-sided, didn't have any objectivity, and there was sense that innocent until proven guilty didn't exist. However, in the beginning, Ross was named as a suspect, but in the daily papers, that quickly changed. The Age did publish the progression of the trial and arrest of Ross, from being a suspect to the findings of evidence like the victim's clothing and DNA, again, like the hair strands. That was only within a 3-day period. The accused is depicted as straight up guilty. There's no question, they've caught the killer. Headlines used heavy language like murdered, which only emphasised the weight of the case, and it made it sound worse for Ross to the public. The overall name of the case stuck. People still refer to that case by its almost haunting name. Gun Alley murder. 3 words with 3 really negative connotations. There's gun, which is obviously a weapon made to end a life. To me, alley is a term that just sounds dodgy. And murder, which is pretty self-explanatory. The victim, Alma Turk's age, was a big portion of the way she was portrayed. 12-year-old victim is repeated regularly throughout the reports. Her personality trait is always described as a girl who would always do as she was told and wouldn't walk a fine line or do something risky. She lived with her grandma, so these kind of facts makes it more upsetting and evokes more emotion from readers, just like they would do in modern media today. There are vast similarities in the way the media portrays accused and victims in crime-related stories, as they are just taking the information the police give them. However, a major difference is that in today's modern media, they are more objective and act as a fourth estate and can carry out the role of check and balancing the actions of other departments like the police and the courts. There are also a greater amount of guidelines around what can and cannot be published. This case was front page news for months, and once Colin Ross was arrested, his face was on the cover all the time, which gave the public the idea that he was already found guilty, which in fact he was only a suspect. The amount of information released about this man allowed for the public and potential jurors to preconceive an opinion of him, which therefore jeopardised Ross's right to a fair and unbiased trial. This case shows just how far the police can go when under pressure. It also shows how easily people can be manipulated back in the 20s, and how little people needed to see to be convinced that someone is guilty of a crime. The police ignored, twisted, and lied about evidence that was there, proving that Colin Ross was innocent, and it was easy for them to get away with it because ordinary people didn't have the authority and couldn't have their voices heard in a time of true hierarchy. You could definitely say that the reputation of the team of investigators and the police would be heavily damaged after this case, as they sent an innocent man to jail and he was sentenced to the worst punishment, death by execution. To get that decision wrong and to do that to an innocent man and family would make it hard for those officers to sleep at night and can tarnish some of the faith that people have in the police department. A general moral lesson for the society of this time and for people of the future would to not judge a book by its cover, to make sure the proper procedures are carried out, especially when messing with somebody's life, to also not believe everything you hear when there's only one side of the story out there. If this case had happened today, firstly, the police would have conducted a much more fair investigation and would consider all suspects and witnesses and hold a more thorough investigation. The media would also be quick to hold the police and courts accountable for their actions. In a time where courts keep making the same mistake of granting bail to those who end up reoffending, the media outlets are the ones who represent the views of another side, who thus have to hold the courts accountable for their actions. It's almost a century later, but in 2008, the victims and Colin Ross's families came together with the help of people who had been working hard investigating the crime and cleared Colin Ross's name, and the family got the burial they deserved to have for a man who became the victim of the people who supposedly keep this city safe. Here's a link to the short video which just reaffirmed why Australia no longer has the death penalty.
The remains of a Melbourne man have been returned to his family 90 years after he was executed for a murder he didn't commit. Colin Campbell Ross was hanged in 1922 for the rape and murder of 12-year-old Alma Turtsky. Today, Ross was remembered as a family man who maintained his innocence to the end. Victoria's Attorney-General took the opportunity to denounce capital punishment.
The death penalty doesn't stop crime, but its finality, particularly in a case like this, where people get it wrong, where the jury gets it wrong, means that you can never bring back a person who's gone to the gallows.
The government pardoned Ross in 2008 after a ruling that scientific evidence was incorrectly interpreted. Family members say they're relieved that justice has finally prevailed.
Thank you.